If you can dream it, we can help you create it. Welcome to the You Create podcast, the show that teaches you how to take the power and flexibility of a Stepcraft 3D CNC system and turn your ideas into reality. So let your ideas flow, because we want to know, what will you create?
Welcome to the You Create podcast. This is episode 6, and I'm Eric Royer, your host. I want to thank you for joining us again this week. I'm sorry this episode was a little bit later than I expected. I was actually away on vacation for about 6 days or so I did not have a chance to record while I was away, but I want to make up for it this week. I think I'm going to try to knock off a couple recordings here. I did manage to catch up on some email over the weekend since I got back, and one question that I get a lot from our website, specifically as it pertains to new users, is what software do I need? And I know I've mentioned this in a previous podcast as well. And, you know, again, I mentioned before that you break it down and you need 3 basic pieces of software. You need software to design whatever it is that you're going to 3D print, mill, cut, or carve. You need CAM software, which will turn that design into toolpath assignments and G-code that your machine will actually be able to run. And then you need software to run the machine. Now, if you're 3D printing, you need the same thing. You need to have a design software. Then you need to have what's called a slicing software, which will take the design that you have and it'll slice it into layers, and then it'll turn that into G-code that you can run on your printer. So I've talked about various things. We do a lot of work here with Vectric software, and I kind of wanted to dedicate this episode to a program from Vectric called Cut 2D. Now, this is a program that I recommend anybody who buys one of our Stepcraft machines. I highly recommend that they spend the $149 and make the investment into this program. The reason that I suggest it so much is because you're getting an awful lot of program for the money. And basically, Cut 2D will allow you to not only design things that you want to create in the program, but it'll also import designs from other programs as well. And you can import 2D data from the formats like DXF, DWG, EPS, AI, if you're using Adobe Illustrator, and so on. So you have the best of both. If you are just getting into this and you have not really learned how to use a drawing program such as SketchUp or AutoCAD or Inkscape or Illustrator, that's okay. You could actually do an awful lot with Cut 2D because it does have design functionality built right into it. So some of the features that this the program has is one of the things, like I was just saying with design, is vector shape creation. So there's a comprehensive set of drawing tools that will let you easily create vectors from scratch, or you can import data. Now, options that they have for creation of shapes are basic stuff such as circles, an ellipse, rectangle, a polygon, a star, along with line, curves, and arc drawing tools. So you also have the ability to edit individual nodes as well. So when you really look at this functionality, most of the things that you're going to design, or at least the basic hobbyist or intro person are going to design, Vectric Cut 2D gives you all the tools that you're going to need to make that happen. Now, it also has a full set of text manipulation tools. So you can draw text out, you can manipulate it, curve it, you can recess it. There's a lot of different features that you have there too. So if you're looking to do like a simple sign or just basic everyday kind of drawing, and you want to have a plaque made that has a letter in it, if you're using your machine to do engraving, or if you're using your machine for a drag knife, then Cut 2D is really all you need to get those applications done. Now, another feature that I absolutely love on Cut 2D, which works very, very well, And a lot of people will ask me, okay, I don't know how to draw anything. I don't really want to learn. How do I take something that I see, like for instance, maybe it's a black and white image or an outline of a piece of clip art or something. How do I make that? Well, Vectric Cut 2D offers a new feature called image tracing vectorization. And basically what it does is it allows you to take a imported file, and it could be anything. It could be a scanned drawing, a graphic design, a photo. It could be a piece of clip art that you see on Google Images, and it allows you to bring that in, and you can manipulate the colors in the image to create an outline. And when you click on create outline, what it'll do is depending on how you vary the colors, and there's some settings there that allow you to vary different parameters, it will make the outline smoother and more accurate. So depending on the image, how complex the image, you have a lot of flexibility there. When you're done, what you can do is just hide the image layer, and what you're left with is a perfect vector outline of that image that you imported. And what's cool about it is now it's a vector, so you can resize it, you can make it any size you want, and you're not going to lose any quality. Like if you had a bitmap image that you downloaded, say a PNG or a JPEG file off of Google Images, and you bring it into Photoshop or Illustrator or something like that, and you were to make that file 3 times the size that it was when you downloaded it, you'll notice the quality degrades. It gets very pixelated. That doesn't happen with vector images. Vector images basically it's a mathematical process that makes an outline of a drawing, or it uses lines, and everything scales using math as opposed to using a stretched version of pixels that you would with a basic bitmap image. So very, very cool feature on Cut 2D. If you're looking to, you don't really want to learn how to draw a lot, but you do want to be able to take an image that you saw online and bring it in and mill it out, or cut it out on a piece of vinyl or something like that. That's just a perfect tool for that. You have advanced text tools, which are really cool. They let you use both TrueType and OpenType fonts to create text outlines. In addition, the software comes with a selection of specialist single stroke and stick engraving fonts that are more efficient for machining, making things like badges and small signs. So those fonts have been tuned specifically for things like engraving and V-carving. So you have the ability to do pretty much anything you want with text. You can automatically resize the text. There's also some tools for fitting text to a curve, and there's interactive arcing and spacing as well, including kerning, which will allow you to space the letters out and manipulate them like that. So very, very powerful tools for text manipulation. This is really handy if you're going to do, I'm not going to say basic signs. Like if you want to get into V-carving and stuff like that, the Cut 2D is not really going to do it for you. You really have to jump up to VCarve or VCarve Pro from Vectric. But if you want to do two-dimensional text, so you want to make a plaque and you want to engrave with a regular end mill the text into that piece, you can do that very easily. But moreover, with Stepcraft, you have the option of putting on an engraving tool, a drag knife, stuff like that. So if you're going to use those tools instead of a regular rotary end mill, Cut 2D is perfect for that, because it'll allow you to draw out your text, and then you put your drag knife in, a piece of vinyl down, or a piece of craft paper, or whatever your object is, and it will actually run the drag knife along the outline and create those perfect letters for you. So it's not just for CNC machining, milling, or carving. It's also for applications like engraving, drag knife, etc. So I mentioned earlier that you can import 2D data. That's one thing that's really cool too. If you're used to a regular CAD program, then there's no point in necessarily learning something new. If you're fast and efficient with a CAD program or with a drawing program such as Illustrator or Inkscape, then you're perfectly fine utilizing those files, and you can just import them. So you can import from a lot of design formats, including, like I said, DXF, EPS, AI, and even PDF files. Once the file's imported, the program has a wide variety of tools to make working with this data really efficient. Now, there's a lot of tools that you can use. Sometimes when you import a vector from another program, such as AI or SketchUp, or you'll sometimes get kind of open vectors where the lines are not completely closed. And in order for Cut2D to work properly, you need to have a fully closed set of vectors, meaning like if you were making a square, you can't have the corner in one corner not touch. All the points have to connect. So there's a lot of tools for using the rejoin open vectors, which is great because what you could do is highlight the entire drawing, click join open vectors, and it'll instantly link up and join all vectors that may be open on that. That saves you a ton of time from having to zoom in and manipulate each one by hand. So you have the ability as well to export data from Cut2D in either DXF, EPS, or AI formats. And this can be important if you're going to share something that you design in Cut2D with somebody else or with a customer so that they can use it for maybe planning a layout or an installation or something. So it's not, the things you design are not just stuck within Cut2D. You can output them and export them. Maybe you have a rough idea of a design, something you want to do, and you bring it into Cut2D, but there's some really high-end detail that you want to do. So you can export that as a DXF file, for instance, or an AI, and give it to your designer, and they can then take your rough design and add more detail to it, things that maybe it might be a little bit over your head, but you can have somebody who specializes in that do that. So that's a really cool feature as well. Another thing that you could do with Cut2D is it allows you to do basic dimensioning. And this is important too, especially if you're designing something in Cut2D that you want to share with a client, or you want to have, maybe you're part of a team. Instead of drawing in CAD, if it's something that's relatively simple, you can draw it in Cut2D. You can add your dimensions to it, print it out, and bring it to the table, and you can see, everybody can see, okay, this circle is 4.25 inches in diameter, and so this square is over here, and they can get a really good idea of what the basic dimensions are for that particular project that you're working on. Now, there's another set of features in here. It's edit objects features and transform objects, and these set of tools will let you do a lot of things to the vectors that are already in there. So, for instance, if you have a vector that you've created, and say it has a really tight inside curve, and you're going to use a 3mm end mill or an 1/8 inch end mill to mill this out. If the inside radius of that vector is smaller than 3mm, then the end mill will not get all the way in to get the detail that you need. And if that curve is important, what you can do is you can go in using some of the tools that they have, and you can modify that inside radius. So you can drag the different data points on there and move it so that it's larger, so the end mill will fit in there. And that's one nice thing with Cut2D is every time you assign an end mill in a toolpath, you can view what the finished product is going to look like basically in real life. And I found it to be about 99% accurate to what you actually end up milling. So by going back and forth between the live view and the drawing, you can see what the detail changes are based on little things that you can manipulate. So they give you tools that will easily allow you to scale, move, mirror, distort. You can group, weld, trim. You can extend, offset, and you can smooth and join different points together. So you have very, very precise control over editing on these vectors, and you can either use your keyboard or your mouse and keep making adjustments until the layout that you're making is absolutely perfect. Now, in a case where you might be making more than one part, or you're going to duplicate the same part on a piece of material, they have tools that allow you to lay out your vector files. You can create symmetrical layouts. You can create a circular array. You can arrange them evenly or evenly spaced in a rectangular array, and it will allow you to copy and fit the number of parts that you need in a specific amount of space. So that becomes very handy too, to try to minimize the material waste. Now, another option is layer management. Sometimes your drawings can get pretty detailed, and you may have a layer for a border, a layer for holes that you need drilled. Maybe there's another layer for a pocketing that you're doing. You have a very in-depth layer management system built into Cut 2D that will allow you to hide things, so you can hide some of the more complex layers while you're working on the basic outline, and it allows you to click those layers on and off so that you don't have to get burdened by a lot of extra data on your screen. So that becomes very, very handy. They have rulers and snap grid and guidelines, which I find very, very handy, especially if you know you've got to make a part that's a very specific dimension. You can create guidelines, and you can use the ruler tool to make sure, just like you would in a CAD program, you can make sure that your drawing is going to be exactly what you need to scale. And the snapping feature is nice because say you drew something and you need to extend from one particular point. As you move the mouse pointer close to that point, it's automatically going to snap, so that when you don't have to zoom in really, really far to make sure you're right on that corner pixel. It'll automatically put the pointer right there, so when you click on it, your line or shape is going to extend from that particular point. Another feature, I don't use this a lot, but I have seen some videos online where people have used it. They have a Create Vector Texture feature, and this is basically a texture tool that you can create a ton of different shapes and variations from different wave patterns and things like that. And I guess if you had a part that had a big void in there, say you were pocketing out a spot and you want to add some decorative effect in there, that's what this will do. This will let you create different waves or lines, or maybe you want to simulate a wood grain or a sandblast effect. They have the ability to add those kind of textures to your designs as well. Now, up until this point, I was talking a lot about the design features that Cut 2D has, but the real reason that I suggest this program to just about all of our customers who buy a Stepcraft system is because of its Toolpath Creation. That's really the CAM part of the software package. Now, while the design part is very powerful and it's great for most people because it's an all-in-one program, it's the Toolpath Creation that is extremely necessary, especially if you're drawing your designs from another program other than Cut 2D. So the first thing you do when you're setting up a job is you set your material. Basically, you're going to set the thickness of the material. You can work in both imperial and metric dimensions. You set your zero position, whether it's on the top of the surface of the material or on the bottom. You can set your XY datum, which is basically your start point. A lot of times we usually use lower left corner, but there are some cases where you might want to use the center point. It's a reference position that you would have, which is where the XY starts when you run a job. So it gives you that ability to assign that when you're setting up your material. Now, there's a lot of features that are built in that you don't even know you need until you actually start milling something. As an example, there's an automated tab feature. Now, when you lay your material down and you start milling, especially when you're milling the profile, as you're cutting the final pass where you're cutting completely through the material, if you don't assign tabs to it, depending on the shape and size of the part, once the end mill comes around and breaks loose the last piece of material, it's possible that final cutout piece could move a little because there's nothing holding it down, and that your end mill could end up hitting it. It could vibrate. It could get caught on the end mill as it pulls up when it finishes. So the program allows you to assign tabs, and basically you could set the width and height of the tabs and the position around the piece that you're creating, so that those tabs, when you're done, you pull them the stock off. There's going to be these little tabs that you can cut off with a small saw or razor knife, and that will break your piece free. This is a very, very handy feature to have, especially for most of the different mounting types that are out there. When you're holding material down, it comes in really, really handy. There's a lead in and out and overcut distance to prevent dwell and marks that appear on components. You have an advanced ramp option, which allows for controlling how the cutter enters the material to reduce heat buildup and wear. This is really important when you're working with hardwoods or even aluminum. You don't want to just bury the bit in. Ramping it will allow it to enter the material at an angle, and as it starts and hits the surface, it'll work its way down to your final single pass cut depth. So you have options for pocketing, drilling, and inlaying and profile toolpaths. Now, basically what those are, we call Cut 2D it's called a 2D program, but I refer to it more as a 2.5D, because you have your XY coordinates that you can do profiling and things like that to cut a part out of a material, but you also have the ability to do pocketing and drilling. And what that'll do is it'll let you assign a depth to, say you're building a square and then you want to cut a smaller square in the middle of that, but you only want to go down half the material thickness. So the first thing you're going to do is set up a pocket, and you're going to click on the outline for the inner square, and you're going to say, okay, I only want to go down 1/4 of an inch here, even though my material is 1/2 inch thick. And then after that's done, you set a profile, and you will cut the outline of the final part out. So when you're done, you'll end up with a bigger square with a smaller square that's recessed into it, and that's called pocketing. And that's where the 1/2 D comes into play, that it gives you the ability to not always have to cut all the way through the material, so you can cut down. And most of the two-dimensional type drawing, unless you're carving or doing 3-dimensional images that have a lot of curves and stuff, Cut 2D is going to be more than fine for most hobby applications. You want to design radio control parts or model train parts, things like that. You can do an awful lot with Cut 2D without having, finding that you have some limitations to it. There's a drilling toolpath. Maybe you want to make a game that has a lot of holes in it, or your particular design, has a lot of mounting holes for whatever that part is going to be used for. It allows you to do what's called Peck Drilling, where it'll bring the end mill down a certain depth and then pull it up all the way out to remove the material from the hole. This is really handy when you start drilling out deeper holes within your material. By being able to pull that back up, it brings the dust and chips out of the hole. So that's another feature that's really good. The auto inlay toolpath feature is relatively new as well. Sometimes, especially with woodworkers, you have maybe you're designing, say, a jewelry box, and on the top of the jewelry box you want to have a heart. Let's say you want to put in there. So the heart, though, the inlay is going to be a different material than the actual material that the jewelry box is made from. The auto inlay toolpath will calculate both the inlay and the part that's going to be put into it afterwards, and the calculation allows it so that there's a significant gap to allow the parts to fit together, but when they are together, you don't even notice that there's a gap there at all. And that was something that used to be very difficult to try to program out. If your mill is very, very accurate, then what would end up happening is you could say you want to just draw the letter O, and you want to inset that into a pocket that you created. If your machine is very accurate, what'll happen is you can set up to do the profile for the letter and a pocket for the recess, and it would be so tight that you would never be able to get it in there. There has to be a tiny, tiny bit of gap that's added into the recessed part so that the inlay fits in well, and the Cut 2D will take care of that, and it factors all that in for you. Now, one of the features I mentioned before is the Toolpath Preview. So once you're done assigning tool paths to all the different parts of your model, you can go into the preview, and it's a fully 3D preview, and it lets you manipulate and turn the object and look at it. And I don't know, I can't tell you how many hours that this feature alone has saved me, plus wasted material costs, because a lot of times, like I said, you might be using a specific diameter end mill and you're expecting one result, but your drawing may have parts on it that the end mill can't get into. And Cut2D will automatically factor that. It's not going to force the end mill to go into a corner that doesn't exist. And it will allow you to take a look at that so you can make adjustments to your drawing or different data points so that you end up getting the result that you're looking for. And I've had this happen quite a few times where I thought something was going to be perfect, and when I looked at the 3D view, I was like, oh, I forgot about that one spot, and I was able to go and correct it rather than waste time and material milling out a part that wasn't going to work properly. Now, one thing that we talk about, we always use a spoil board, which is basically a piece of sacrificial material that goes underneath the workpiece that you're working on. And what I like to do is I always like to send the end mill, a few thousandths of an inch deeper than the material thickness. So my last cut, I like to cut through the backside of the material into the spoil board. And what that does is that gives me a clean cut on the bottom of the material. And when you do that, if you say, okay, I want to go a couple thousandths deeper than the material thickness that you assigned, the software will automatically, when you go to generate that toolpath, give you a warning to say, you're cutting deeper. And that's come in handy a lot too, because sometimes I'll accidentally hit an extra digit in there, and I'm telling it to cut an inch through something where I only wanted, a hundredth of an inch. So there's a lot of little warning things that will ensure that you have some success, especially if you're a beginner. That's very important. The software will estimate machining times, so you can kind of get an idea for a given design that you're doing, roughly how much time it's going to take. And this is kept in consideration based on the feeds and speeds that you assign for the different tools that you're doing. There's an auto tiling feature, which I mentioned before, which will allow you to divide the tool paths and fit the material or to the machine limits of the material. So that's automatically done without you having to sit there and manually calculate out, how many across and how many up and down of a duplicate part can you create. So that's another feature. There is a quick engrave feature as well for drag tools, which is really good. That comes in handy for especially for the Stepcraft machine with the engraving and the drag knife options that we have. Along with the on-screen preview, you also have the ability to print out your designs in both 2 or 3D preview. So if you're getting ready to mill out a part or something that you designed, it allows you to print that full rendering so you can show it to a client, or just make sure that it looks exactly like you want. And being able to share those files is a very, very powerful tool. Now, another thing, Vectric's website has a lot of support and video tutorials, which is another reason why I like suggesting this program to newbies and beginners in the CNC world, because the videos that they create are very robust, and they're kind of designed in such a way that even if you've never done this before, you'll feel pretty comfortable, in an hour or so after watching a few videos. Their support forum is very active, and if you got stuck on a problem, I found that questions are answered easily within 24 hours. Now, we do a lot of how-to and tutorial videos as well for Stepcraft, and you can see them on our YouTube channel at Stepcraft Inc. And we'll walk you through how to do very specific things with Vectric. I'm not going to produce a video that shows you everything on the program because they've already done that. But, we'll do a project to say, okay, here, if you want to design this, here's how we did it from start to finish. And that's another good way of learning how to use the program. Now, the downsides. Vectric programs are Windows only. So if you're a Mac user, you're going to have to run Parallels or Boot Camp with a version of Windows on your computer. I run Parallels on my MacBook Pro, and I use Windows 7, and I never have a problem at all. I'm not a huge Windows fan, but the fact that I'm working within my Mac makes me happy. So I have no issues there running their software on my Mac at all. Now, there is a Pro version of Cut 2D, and there's a few features that the Pro version has. I just want to make you aware of it. The Pro version, I think, is like $449. It's definitely a jump up in price, but there are a few different things that are worth noting here. On the Pro version, there's no size limit. So the desktop version of the program, the one that's $149, has a 24 by 24 inch maximum job size. So if you want to cut jobs that are larger than that, you can do it. You just have to use the Toolpath tiling feature and then cut the job in sections, whereas the Pro Edition has no limit on the size. You can create merged toolpaths with the Pro version. This isn't something that I've had a need for too much, but there are cases where, especially on complex parts and stuff, where you'll want to minimize CNC moves, and this will let you merge your toolpaths together, and it'll allow you to create a more efficient toolpaths. You can create a job sheet with the Pro, which is good. It lets you print out a worksheet. So if you were designing something and then you had a machinist that was running it, this worksheet will give them all the data, what tools to use, what toolpaths are assigned to what files, what the material size and thickness is, all that stuff. And it creates a really nice looking job sheet that you can pass on to an employee. There are toolpath templates that you can use with the Pro version. There's true shape nesting. Now, this is one feature that is very, I find very useful. Say you're designing a puzzle or a 3D puzzle, and you've got a lot of different parts. Well, minimizing material waste is always important, and for a lot of different applications. Well, if these different parts of the puzzle are they're curved and they're odd shaped and stuff, for you to sit there and try to manipulate each one on a sheet to get the least amount of waste and toolpath redundancy is very, very time consuming. True shape nesting basically lets you take all the components from your drawing, and it will optimize the placement of every part so that you have the absolute minimal loss of material, and while still keeping an efficient toolpath. The Pro version also includes something called gadgets, and these are small programs that add additional functionality to Cut 2D Pro. One example of that is that they have a gadget to create dovetail style joints using a standard end mill, and basically it does all the calculations for you to create those joints so you don't have to draw them manually. There's also a very specific drag knife gadget that they have, which is, if you're familiar with a Donic drag knife, that gadget would be used for using that particular drag knife. It calculates the radiuses to make the tool actually spin. The last feature that the Pro has is something called production plate engraving, which lets you merge text lists into templates for badges and industrial plates. It can be used to merge CSV and text-based lists using variables that can automatically scale to fit a pre-made design layout. So if you're doing a lot of production plate engraving and high volumes of that, this could be a very popular fit for you. Now, Vectric does allow you to download a trial version on their website, which is Vectric, Vectric.com. We at Stepcraft sell all of their software. We sell it for the same exact price that they do in the UK. Vectric is a UK-based company. So you're welcome to download the trial version from them, and if you want to purchase it, you could simply go to stepcraft.us and buy the software, and we'll send it out to you right away. So that's basically it. I mean, I really want to give you kind of a high-level overview of this program because I do get asked this question a lot on what program to buy. And Cut 2D is one that I think everybody should have in their arsenal. I'm familiar with programs like Mastercam and some of the higher level BobCAD that have a lot of these features built in. But these programs are very complicated. They're expensive. And they require, quite a bit of a learning curve to get to use them. Vectric has made this very, very simple for even the rank beginner. First time you plug in your CNC machine, you can run this software, and I would say within an hour tops, you're going to be milling stuff and just amazed at how easy the process was. So I hope this was helpful to you, and I really appreciate you guys listening to this podcast. And I would also appreciate if you could go to iTunes and give us a rating on this. That's going to help get the podcast out, featured in front of more and more people on the iTunes store. So with that said, if you have any questions at all, please go to the website and you can email me from there. You can also leave a comment on the show notes section for this episode. And the episode show notes will be at youcreatepodcast.com/006. Thank you very much, and I look forward to talking to you in the next episode.